Welcome to Childcare Challenge and Dilemma Within Daycare. Today we have a special guest, a childcare advocate. Her advocacy for childcare. When I met her in the union, she's great. I don't know, there's no word that could describe how her passion for to better the early education system. And today we have a very special guest, Eva Bermúdez Zimmerman, if I'm pronouncing your last name right. And she will introduce herself. Eva, go ahead, take it over.
Well, thank you for having me here on Childcare Challenges and Dilemmas. And you did pronounce it right. It's a mouthful, Eva Bermúdez Zimmerman. My background is as an advocate in the childcare industry. And I've been working in the childcare industry now 12 years. My goodness, time flies truly when you're having a blast in what you do. Even though that blast, me having fun in what I do means working every single day in the childcare dilemma, right? I love the parents. I love the providers. I love, how much passion there's in this industry. But my goodness, there's so many things that are wrong in the system itself. So I'm a childcare advocate. I'm the director of childcare for Connecticut's Future. We are a statewide coalition that concentrates on trying to fix and transform the child care system so we can support parents and providers like you. So happy to be here. Thank you for having me on.
I have asked some of the providers within within the union and within the childcare system, and these are the questions they asked me to ask you, and they want to know, right? They want to know what are the importance of early education, the impact of quality childcare development, the availability of effort childcare options, strategy to support working parents, the role of government policy in childcare, the benefit of diverse and inclusive childcare setting, ways to promote childcare safety and the well-being and childcare environment, and the latest research and the best practice in the field of childcare.
Let's start with the industry as a whole. So advocacy and policy and childcare and how that really impacts child for those who are not totally aware is all encompassing. Right now, nationwide, we're in this very unique position where eyes are on childcare. People are paying attention and listening, and parents are really realizing that they're stuck with such a hefty bill that they can't pay, and they're scrambling to figure things out. And providers, my goodness, providers, childcare educators, childcare owner operators, they've known this from the very beginning, right? They know how impossible it is to balance a childcare system that really doesn't give them support. So in childcare policy, we are looking for more attention. We're looking for more funding and acknowledging that changes can't come into the system unless we do have state support. Right now, the programs that exist to pay for childcare are very minimal, and they're only there for parents who are super poor, parents who they really need help. But everybody else, like the everyday parent, someone who makes more than, $35,000 a year, which is, most people here in the state of Connecticut, especially if they're getting paid full time in a minimum wage job and they are working 40 hours, they are most likely making way too much money, which is crazy, even at minimum wage, to qualify for a childcare subsidy called Care for Kids. So then they're left with the dilemma of how in the world am I going to pay for it? Who's going to help? And their options are really depending on that child care owner operator, that child care provider to fill the gaps. That child care provider then becomes not only their therapist because this parent's going through a crisis, but the provider is a grant specialist, right? They're trying to find money out there that exists. Then the provider is also becoming an expert on how to navigate the bureaucracy of government, right? Trying to figure out, well, if there's a program here that the state provides and there's another federal program there, then between 2 or 3 or 4 different places, I can help this parent pay me because I need to get paid because I have my own family. At the end of the day, the only way that we can really change the system that is so broken is shouting on the mountaintops, shouting on the rooftops, and letting those elected officials realize and know that things are bad. We need help. And public funding really is the best way to help us out of this crisis. So that's the policy part of it. But Tasheianna, if you can remind me maybe one or two other categories so I can touch on those topics as well.
Yeah, I was going to ask you a question. Because I hear you said for parents that make $30,000 than the average parent. Like I don't know if you've seen the whole episode of one of my parents that's saying, her issue is the growth, that they do it before taxes, but that's not what she could take home. That's not her take home pay after taxes and everything. What do you have to say about that? How can we implement or put an implement in place where care for kids do not base it off the growth anymore, but what the take home pay is?
That's still public policy. The system is right now written to take into consideration what a parent makes, right? Their take home pay. And these programs, subsidies, what they call them, subsidies, care for kids, these programs, they write into law that at the end of the day, when a parent or a person who applies to that program, they have to qualify, but make under a certain amount of money. And that includes, any last dime that you get, and they don't take in consideration taxes. They don't take in consideration the bills you have to pay. They don't take in consideration the fact that you have rent or a mortgage. They only truly look at what you make on paper, right? But on paper is not what you make in reality. So my heart goes out to that parent that you had on in your most recent episode, because it's not fair, right? It's not fair. It's not fair if a parent is making $45,000 on paper, and then at the end of the day, after taxes, we all pay taxes, right? Social Security, Medicare, paid family leave, all these programs that we need, right? We need as a society. I'm happy to pay it. But at the end of the day, you're only taking home 20% less. You're actually taking home 36,000, 37,000. That's a little hard, right? That makes the conversation really different when you're trying to balance out your groceries and the cost of childcare, which in the state of Connecticut right now, the average right now, you're looking at $22,000 a year. Some parents have to pay even up to 30,000 depending on where they live. My explanation for her is, man, the system really is lame. We have to fix it. I hear you. We have now advocates and coalitions in place to try to fix it, but you're not alone. That frustration is very real.
Right. Thank you. Good. The next, go back to the question now. The other question is, what are the strategies to support working parents?
The best strategy to support parents is talking about it, having programs, podcasts like this, right? Like, imagine how exciting this is. I think you're the first podcast in Connecticut talking about this issue. I don't think there's anybody else out there doing this. And that's a step forward. I know it sounds crazy and silly that like something like a podcast is a step forward to try to transform a broken system, but it is, right? We have to find ways to better communicate and meet people where they're at. There's so many parents and providers who feel isolated, working hard, right? When you're in your career, whatever chosen career you're in, provider, teacher, Amazon, supplier, you're in the grind, right? Many of us are in that survival mode and have tunnel vision when it comes to how to make sure that we're paying our bills and getting through to the next day. But to break through that survival mode and really support each other, we have to have conversations, and be it a podcast, a few minutes on social media, connecting with friends and family members about a topic that you're passionate about, a topic that impacts you, makes all of the difference. My goodness, all of the difference. I know that I'll give you an anecdote. So, Childcare for Connecticut's Future is now going into our fourth year as a coalition. The beginnings of that conversation of why we want to change childcare have been going on for decades. It's not new information that childcare providers are in crisis. That's old news. They were in crisis way before COVID. COVID was horrible. A lot of people died and people were in need. And then on top of that crisis was the fact that parents couldn't find childcare. Providers had to close their doors. So it was a childcare industry that was underpaid, forgotten, in chaos, then magnified by a pandemic, where then people realize, my goodness, I don't have access to childcare. I still need to go to work. What am I going to do? Providers realize, I don't want to get sick. Kids, I love them, but they're little, pockets full of germs, and God knows in this pandemic what's going to happen to me. And like I mentioned earlier, it's a wake up call for the everyday person, but definitely not a wake up call for the mother, not a wake up call for the parent or for the provider. And right now, the only vehicles that we have to bring us together out of the COVID pandemic, but still talking about the crisis of childcare, are social media. It's, connecting the dots through an email, through Zooms, through webinars, because providers and parents don't have abundant time to advocate and talk about how we fix the broken system. That's what we have advocates for, right? That's what we have lobbyists for, people who are paid to do this professionally. But together, sharing the story of that childcare owner, sharing the story of that parent or guardian, that does make the difference when it comes to changing policy, making sure that politicians understand why adding new laws to support us really make a difference.
And they also want to know, what are the importance of early childhood education and the impact of quality childcare development?
Well, this is a topic that we don't talk about enough, the importance, right? Using that example that I mentioned earlier about we're on survival mode. Most parents and guardians, and I know I say parents a lot, but I mean anyone who's caring for a child, right? Because there's grandparents, there's aunties, there's uncles caring for children, and every one of them are doing the best that they can do. Most of the time, they want the best, right? They want the best education, the best future, the brightest future, of course. But because of financial reasons, because of problems with access, maybe not enough access in their town or their city, they're forced to put their child maybe in a program that's not quite in alignment or quite what they wanted, right? Maybe that parent or grandparent wanted their kid in a family child care provider's home, someone that's close knit, more intimate relationship, but there wasn't anyone available. There's some towns in the state of Connecticut that are small that don't always have an abundance of access to any type of childcare. Sometimes parents and grandparents have to drive outside of their town 5, 10, 15 miles to find childcare, be it a center or a home-based provider. But going back to your question of, accessibility and how we make sure that people have that ability to get quality care and why quality care matters, the curriculum of childcare. People forget that there's been a lot of changes in the study of the childcare industry. Way back, 100 years ago, 150 years ago, there was an expectation that raising a child was as easy as just feeding them, changing them. No biggie. Fast forward to 50 years ago, then that conversation of like, oh, we should really be spending more time with them. And now, fast forward to 30 years ago. 30 years ago, social scientists really realized they're like, wait a second, there's something to childcare. I think it's more important than just feeding a child, reading to a child, and changing a child. There's now 3 decades of social science studies, real research that has proven to us tracking a child from, infancy, 0 years old, from the day they were born, all the way to adulthood, that shows us a child that has a strong foundation, an educational foundation that's really interacting different parts of their brain from 0 to 5 allows that child in the future, let's say K to 12, first grade, second grade, third grade, maybe it wasn't amazing. It was just like, again, just the basics. Maybe their school system that they went to just wasn't the best school system. But if that child had a foundation from 0 to 5 that was extremely strong, had a great child care educator, then that person, when they're an adult, has a better likelihood of having lower incidences of health problems, a better likelihood of that same person not having problems with the criminal justice system, that same person having the ability to carry a job that pays, above minimum wage with the potential of even going to college. Something that seems so small in that long, wide array of creating a human, an adult, 0 to 5, that little pocket in time, focusing on that pocket in time allows a better cultivated adult when they're older, even if first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh grade weren't amazing. And that's study after study. It also shows, we have studies that prove that that foundation really gears that child up for better reading when they are going into first grade, better abilities in mathematics, better attention span. So it is critical. Like, if there's something to be said about reducing, like, let's say you don't care about education or educating a child or educating our future. Fine. You don't want to educate the future. You're not about it. Let's say you want to just save money on the economy. You're thinking about your bottom line. You're thinking like a business owner. And you, as a state of Connecticut, my God, are exhausted that there's so many programs out there that are, giving things away. Well, the easiest way to avoid having to help people when they're older, help people avoid jail, help people make sure that they have a job stable enough to pay for health insurance, help people make sure that they have a job at all. Well, believe it or not, it is focusing on early care and education. If we focused on those little ones from the get-go, then it gives us a return in our investment of that child of $13 for every dollar we spend on that child. It is simple math. It's simple economy. Now, that's the money end. We have to remember that it's also good for humanity. Parents need the support, grandparents need the support. Everyone should have access to quality childcare the same way that people should have access to, quality health care. This is not a political side. This is just supporting our neighbors and trying to support how we want to grow as a state and have an opportunity for our state to have people who are qualified and educated and have ambitions and a future, right? We all want that for each other. That's part of our society.
And the other question is, what's the benefit to a diverse and inclusive childcare setting and way to promote the safety and well-being of the childcare environment?
Diversity in childcare reminds that child as they're growing up that the world is full of different colors, different people, different necessities, right? And diversity isn't as simple of just saying black or white. There's also diversity when it comes to children who are neurodivergent, right? There are children out there that have autism and have needs. There's also children out there that are born without the ability to walk, or maybe they're born without the ability to see. And these are all different types of diverse children, and they exist in our society. So allowing that child to be in a setting where they get to see the wide array of humanity, they get to see that there isn't just one type of being a human and we all coexist, allows us when we're older to really meet people where they're at and be more inclusive in that conversation, right? If you as a child, and let's say hypothetical here, an example, let's say as a child, you were stuck in a room where that room had only a green wall or green walls. And every single day you were given just bananas. And every single day you were just read the same paragraph. You don't really have, when as you get older, and that repetition, you don't really have a good understanding of other realities. And that's how it is if we stick a child in a space with only one type of person without having the ability to see children of other color, to grow up and understand that there's parents from a same-sex marriage, or child care educators of different types of sexual orientation or backgrounds. We don't want that child to be stuck in just a green room, a green box. We want that child to have access to as many diverse interactions and people and situations as possible, so that we can fortify their brains, prepare their brains for anything that the world is going to bring. And the world brings so many different problems as you get older, good, sad, happy, right? And we want to make sure that that child is emotionally prepared to take it in and react in a way that isn't abrasive. That's our role as adults who are near or interacting with a child, be it a grandparent or the child care provider in that child care setting.
When it comes on to safety and well-being, what are some of the ways to promote safety and well-being in a childcare environment?
Wow, I'm going to bring you in on this one, Tasheianna, because you're also an expert. So, when we're talking about safety and when you're with your little ones, I'm assuming you're, in addition to doing everything that the state of Connecticut has as a rule, right? The child safety gates and making sure that you have a fire extinguisher. Keeping kids safe is also about, going into my comment about emotional awareness, is preparing them for those crises. So Tasheianna, when you are with your child care children, I'm assuming you talk to them a certain part of the year about what fire is and how you have to prepare in case of an emergency. So I'm gonna skip that question if that's okay with you, because I am not a child care provider. I do know the regulations that recommend and make demands of providers for child safety. And I can assure any parent or grandparent listening to this that the rules are very strict when it comes to child safety. They're there, and they're there to protect the little ones.
Restrict. For example, I have a pool, and that study shows that most kids die. A lot of children are dying by water. And I was called in to the office. Let me explain to you, my pool is above 5 feet. And 4 feet, you need a gate. I went the extra mile of putting on a fence around it. And I put not only the fence, I put a slam lock, I put the gate at the bottom, and I'm 5'8", and the gate up top is as tall as me. Okay, and that still wasn't enough. So safety is important when it comes on to water. I have a pond in the front of my yard, and they was like, no, you have to put a fence around that. We're as provider, the little thing that you think is not important that a child won't get into, they will get into. So it's very crucial that we enforce and implement the safety. And I know we may say the state may nitpick in certain rules, but as they call me in, and even I have small children of my own, I get to understand and I see the impact and the importance of safety. And now, like I said, back to what I was saying, a lot of providers may be like, that don't make any sense. The child is not going there. It just takes a split second for you to turn your head for that child to get into stuff. Child are curious. As we all know, in the child care provider, we teach them to learn by touching and feeling, and the curiosity sometimes get the best of them. So safety is number one. And, yes, we do fire drills to prepare them for safety, just in case of a fire, how they will react so we don't get everybody panicking. And I implement a safety bag at the door. So when there's a safety, everyone would grab all their documents and we head through the door and we stand at the other side of the across the street where we wait till a fire truck or whoever is coming and the parent will meet us or something. So safety is important. The other question is, what is the latest research and the best practice in the field of childcare?
There's a lot of national organizations right now that do research on childcare. Just to name a few, there's a CLASP, there's also AES, there's First Five, there's also Rapid, Rapid, like going fast, they're just called Rapid. These different organizations focus on policy, they focus on, P5 strategies also do research on childcare, and they recently, P5 teamed up with the state of Connecticut to figure out how much childcare costs and the impact of childcare and the connection between the parent and the provider. So we are fortunate that there's so many different organizations on a national level that focus on what is childcare doing to our society, like the lack of, what is the impact? There's plenty of places, and I know I was going rapid fire there with the different names, but honestly, if one of the listeners just Googles childcare policy, they're going to see these different organizations listed on their search, in their search engine. Not to be particular of Google, you can be on Safari or anybody else. But yeah, if you do a search, just childcare policy, you'll see different options locally here in the state of Connecticut. If you want to know more information about what's happening with parents, what's happening to our communities, my first recommendation is the ALICE report. So ALICE, they do it nationwide, but they do specify certain data state by state. ALICE, like the name, like Alice in Wonderland, right? ALICE. Asset signifies asset limited income. So they're looking at families that have restrictions. They're looking at families that maybe have financial difficulties, but it gives a really good picture about that connection between families and the economy. And that's sponsored by the nonprofit called United Way. The second organization that does phenomenal research and work, child care and families here in the state of Connecticut. They are called Connecticut Voices for Children. And if you want to go to their website, same like United Way, unitedway.org. I didn't mention it before, but unitedway.org for the Alice one. And then for CT Voices, you can go to CT Voices. I think it's voices.org. I will verify while I explain what CT Voices does. So CT Voices, they pick a topic that impacts families, and they want to make sure that families progress, that they're doing better. And every single year, they pick a topic and they focus on that topic. They do more extensive research, and then they lobby and advocate for legal changes to help that topic. So it could be healthcare, it could be childcare, it could be a tax credit for families. Anything that has to do with supporting families and children, they're all about it. And I did verify their website. Their website is ctvoices.org or org for more information with them. And then the third organization, they don't do as top heavy research as CT Voices does, or like the Alice report, but they are advocating, they are there, and they've got experts who are absolutely fabulous, is the Early Childhood Alliance. The Early Childhood Alliance, they've been around, my goodness, I think 40 plus years in the state of Connecticut. They focus on anything that has to do with, again, like families and children, similar to Voices, but policy changes. They do webinars. They have, during legislative sessions, advocacy days. Anything that impacts basically a little one, they're all about it. And their website is earlychildhoodalliance.com. So that's earlychildhoodalliance.com. But if you want to be engaged, be part of a movement. So we got those awesome people and organizations and partners that are doing research. But if you want to be engaged, advocacy, come to a march, come to an event, then I highly recommend the organization that I work for, and that's Childcare for Connecticut's Future. And our website is childcareforct.org, childcareforct.org. So that's just a little combo of policy meets advocacy and how we work together.
Okay, the last question is, what are your thoughts on the current state of childcare affordability and accessibility? What are your thoughts on it? What are your intakes on it?
It's sad. It's sad. It's so sad. This is not a conversation. Your podcast has dilemma in the title, and I'm not going to paint you a rosy picture that doesn't exist. I'm going to be a realist right there with you.
And
things are, yeah. That's why we're here, right? That's why we're here. Things feel bleak. Things feel depressing. And if you're there and listening and thinking that you have those moments that you're feeling suffocated by the pressure of being a parent, a provider, a grandparent, and trying to figure out what's my next move, I can tell you that we are surrounded by amazing people, mostly women, amazing people who know that the fight is not over. So even though society as a whole, is not quite there with universal childcare, free childcare for everyone, supporting parents, supporting families, we're not there yet. We are really working really hard to make those changes happen. And I do anticipate that in the next 2-3 years, there is going to be a more significant shift to make sure that things are easier. That's what I'll leave you with.
Okay. And my question is, I know Bill 502 was passed. A lot of family child care providers feel like they was left out of it. And I know you have more insight in that bill. Can you elaborate a little bit in that bill and how it benefits us as family child care?
Yeah. So this past legislative session, there were two main bills that a lot of the different nonprofits and advocates were really pulling for and fighting for that did pass. One was a bill to consolidate, bring all of these different programs that the state had together and make the application process easier. Another was a bill to give more teeth and framework to a program called the Early Childhood Fund. So these two bills, the best way I could say and frame it is like they were giving a lot of the behind the scenes help. They didn't create an opportunity for parents or providers to see that that exit plan or that, we're not celebrating. We're not at the point that childcare is solved and everything is fixed and everything is great with these two legislative bills. But they were necessary bills to kick off so that we could add more details in the next legislative session. So 5002 created a pilot program in Eastern Connecticut that the state of Connecticut can pair with different companies and that way pay for the cost of childcare and reduce the cost of childcare for parents. It's a pilot. It's a very select section of the state of Connecticut. It is not everyone. It has not started. We only have right now one business, Electric Boat, that has opted in and said, yes, we're committed to reducing the cost of childcare for parents. And obviously, they're saying that because they need childcare for their 4,000 workers they need to hire. So it helps them. But it didn't help, it's not a pilot for everyone to reduce the cost of childcare. And then 5002, the other part, the Early Childhood Fund, like I mentioned, we created framework, the beginnings of this program. We put in details to create a governance committee, and then that governance committee could select where the money is going to, how it's used. But as of now, there's no money there. So it's like creating laws sometimes real slow. Like we did all this work and we worked really hard and it's good. It wasn't a waste of time. It wasn't, for anyone listening. It was necessary, but it was just the beginning. So hopefully this next session, 2025, we can get some real money, and then we can take the framework that was created in 5002 and have that team select where the money goes to. Obviously, we want it to go to the parents and providers who need it, but we're just not there yet. So again, patience is a virtue when it comes to changing the system and how laws are created.
Okay. So that's my question. And last but not least, healthcare. Family childcare providers are struggling. And like me, for example, I pay for my healthcare because they say I make too much, I'm not qualified for Husky. I have a provider that called me and said, listen, I don't know what to do. I just lost my Husky and I'm diabetic. They said I make six figures. So, but I have a family, like I have a large family and she also have a large family. She's like, after the taxes and everything, I'm not seeing six figure. Yeah, I'm seeing six figure, but I have to pay for mortgage and everything. And I'm 401k. So what would you say to providers? I know we've been fighting to see within our contract that you was our union, the one that oversee the contract when you was working with the union. What do you say for us, the providers that do want healthcare, that want 401k? We're not asking for the commissioner to give it to us. We asking for a discount. Give us a bundle. What would you say to us, to them that's listening? What would you say to them? What's your message?
So there's been conversations with the state of Connecticut, with the Office of Early Childhood, on creating some sort of program. And you're right, Tasheianna, that specifically for certain providers, even more specific, unionized providers, the conversation of healthcare, it's underway, right? It's not a new topic. But for all of the providers, all of the childcare workforce, there isn't a program. You really have to depend on Husky if you qualify for Husky or Access Health CP in order to find access to healthcare if, in fact, your childcare center doesn't give you healthcare, or if you're a childcare provider who isn't married to someone who has access to healthcare. You're kind of like on your own, right? What I will say is, because the conversation started with unionized providers, it is in the mind of the commissioner. I know that because she does text me. She recently texted me asking me about healthcare, and we have these conversations. She is not in a place to guarantee anything, to make promises, right? We're really depending on the legislature to see if they can carry that conversation, and also the union to see if they can carry that conversation in contract negotiations. And my goodness, I don't have a crystal ball, but all I could say is it's on people's minds that they haven't ignored that this is a hot topic. It is necessary. In the meantime, while we wait for the union to negotiate a contract that does have some sort of healthcare program, or wait for the legislature to create something specific for child care educators, Your best bet, if you have the need for healthcare, is Access Health CT, and that website is accesshealthct.com. Access Health CT they really do try to meet you where you're at when it comes to your income. Because Obamacare, or AKA the Affordable Care Act, whichever you are familiar with, was created, here in the state of Connecticut, as a state, our elected officials decided to keep the program. So in the federal government, there was this desire to create very clear guidelines and help to reduce the cost of healthcare. And then different states said, nope, I don't want that. That's a waste of time. That's a waste of money. But here in the state of Connecticut, we said, yeah, give it to us. Like, we want that. Yeah. Any money you got for healthcare, we'll take it, and we'll make sure we double it. So Access Health CT still exists. There are still subsidy programs. There's still ways to help families not have to pay so much money on healthcare. If that's not enough, then there's community health care centers that will help give you care. If your friend, the provider that who has diabetes, if Access Health CT is not a route for her, if it's not affordable enough for her, then there are community health care centers in the state of Connecticut that do give you low or free care. So those are the two main options child care owner operators and child care educators have while we wait for a different system to be created.
Thank you. And I want to thank you for being on our podcast today. And hopefully we can make this, where you could come on more and, discuss more so everyone will be able to see. And I'm happy that you're here. And I thank you for everything and all the hard work that you put into us. And we miss you at the union,
Well, miss you guys too. Thank you for any of the listeners here listening to this very important conversation. The dilemma is real, but we're doing our little part talking about it. Thank you for your time.
All right. Thank you.